A warm welcome, everyone, to our April edition, April 2022 edition of Faith and Society Conversation. As the invitation spelled out, we are trying to have a conversation around prophecy and progress, a theological diagnosis. But this is a discourse that is set in the context of humanity's journey in a search for the unknown or information that is not available to the rest of us. So, in that case, what we are going to try to think about will be to first look at the search for real sources of truth, which Brother Charles will lead us. And then Daniel will take off from there and give us some background and insight on what is prophecy, the centrality of prophecy, and then go through all the way to prophetic and the movement that has we have in today's world. And finally, Brother Charles will then finish us off with a conclusion. But as it has been a tradition here, after all of that, we open it up for the plenary, and that is where we want to have the real conversation, where each and everyone can bring a suggestion, or each and everyone can also ask a question. So without much ado, let me welcome everyone. I can see Samuel Majisafo locked in. Welcome, warm welcome, Samuel. We've missed you. So welcome back to the fold. Right, so we would invite Brother Charles to set us off with the search for real sources of truth.
I thought somebody was saying something.
Brother Charles, you've got the floor now. Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I think those of us who are on this call have experienced the idea of prophecy. We've heard it, especially if you have bothered to attend a watch night service or any 31st December event in Ghana. We hear of a lot of people who come out and they tell us they are prophesying. And why do we talk about prophecy, or why do people tell us they are prophesying? They do so because of our inherent desire to know about tomorrow, the desire to divine the future. That is humanity's need at any time. And that need has fueled our faith in figures from ancient Greek oracles to modern day astrologists. Christianity in particular is a religion whose foundational text is filled with prophecies. You open the Old Testament and it's all prophecy about what God wants to do with his people, or what God has in store for his people, or what the future is going to be because his people have failed to do ABC. So whether the gift of prophecy, which we, in this case, we are using as foretelling, that's predicting the future, continues into the present day, or prophecy persists, even in a theologically advanced world where tools are bound to predict the future, has been a long subject of intense conversations and theological debate. But in recent years, self-described prophets have proliferated across the world, especially in the US. And they are accelerating in stature over the course of especially the Trump era, and also in Africa, as the court oracle, the people who are so close to our rulers and who talk to our rulers and tell them they are receiving messages from God, like on my way here, God asked me to tell you this, when they talk to these people. So they are so closely aligned with centers of power and telling the centers of power what God wants them to do. They are almost private prophets to these people. And on the other hand, too, we do have those who are dealing with the disenfranchised or those who are poor and without. And they are predicting about death, about ailments, about accidents, about occasional prosperity, who is going to make what, and about all things popular. These prophets are stars within what is now one of the fastest growing corners of Christianity. They are a loose but fervent movement led by hundreds of people who believe they can channel supernatural powers and have special spiritual insights into world events. Many of such are independent evangelists of priests who do not lead churches or other institutions. Some operate online, some in their private homes or rented quarters, and through appearances at conferences or as guest speakers at various church seminars and church activities, they make money through book sales, donations, and speaking fees. These are part of the rising appeal of conspiracy theorists in Christian settings. They tell us how things are, and they resist any mainstream sources of information because they know better and they receive the instructions from God. The prophetic imagination roams far beyond national politics, as we have come to see or realize. For those who've been following the World Cup and the recent Ghana-Nigeria matches, these prophets follow our soccer. They can predict who is going to score and what the margin is going to be. They follow our weather patterns. They see the rains and they can tell you why the rains and what God wants to do about the rains. They analyze events in popular culture and global events. They see the wars that are taking place and they can tell you what God's intentions are. And they are particularly, if you care to know, fascinated with Israel. Israel, as we know it today. Almost all prophecies end up with what God wants to do with his chosen people, Israel, and strangely, modern day Israel. Many prophets caution followers against trusting what they read in the news. But in this place, they offer a kind of alternative news cycle, refracting and interpreting events in the real world through a supernatural lens. Everything is supernatural. God is in action, man has no place, and God is taking us where he wants to take us. In my lifetime, and it is unfortunate, but because it is an embarrassment to see that in my lifetime, in spite of all the progress that we've made, a lot of us are given our ability to reason, to analyze, to sift through, to gather information. We are handing them over to these people who believe they are oracles of God. And that is embarrassing. If you've been around since this coronavirus and in the past 2 years, you understand what I'm saying. As the coronavirus swept through the world, and especially in the US in the spring of 2001, several prophets issued public assurances that it would decline by Passover. Once in the Jacobs, one of the most influential American prophets, and someone who identifies herself as a spiritual mentor to Donald Trump, had told us that the virus was going to be contained, and so he instituted a global day of prayer. And he had told us that by March last year, the virus would have dissipated. In Ghana, there were several prayers and fasting events, all geared towards stopping the COVID. We went to church. We were asked to fast, and we were asked to pray to end the virus. Some prophets even claimed they had the antidote, which they offered for sale to the public. And by the fall of 2020, so many prominent prophets had incorrectly predicted the re-election of Mr. Trump. In spite of the apologies and the recriminations, in spite of the failures of all these prophecies, one would have thought we would have seen the end of it. But I tell you, the popularity of self-appointed prophets show now signs of waning. In fact, in Ghana, the police came out and demanded that no one predicts about the future on December 31st, 2021. That all these prophets were predicting things that were death and damnation about Ghanaian personalities. And it's happened. For the first time in my adult life, we only heard about one prophecy. We only heard about one prophecy. And even in that prophecy, the name of our country wasn't mentioned. So where are we? As denominational Christianity declines in the US post the pandemic, and almost across the board, we have people, and I should be honest to say that we have magnetic, independent people full of bravado, stepping into the void of the church. There's this idea that which they are pumping down our truth, that you can't trust anybody except us, except those who have been appointed by God to give us his word. It is a symptom of our time. So many things have happened to make people not believe in institutions. And people think that all mainstream institutions are corrupt. That even the universities or science or government, even the media, cannot be trusted. And so, in the absence of that, we are all out there in search for the real sources of truth. Prophecy has therefore become the tool for us to search for that truth for ourselves. We are seeking the truth about ourselves, about our world, what tomorrow holds for us, and where we are going. That is what has brought us here. Prophecy is actually our own way of trying to find out about ourselves and our place in the world. Can God tell us exactly what he wants us to do? Can we divine the future? Can we know about tomorrow? Those are the questions I will raise, and I'll have Dr. Shen take us through what prophecy is and what inspires it. Dr. Shen.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you very much for one of my favorite writers of all time is Oscar Wilde. And as Oscar Wilde says, the truth is neither pure nor simple. So even to locate the truth for ourselves and locate the truth anywhere can sometimes be contentious and controversial. Whenever we think about prophecy, the mistake that we make is that we confuse forthtelling with foretelling. Prophecy in Israel's thinking is not so much about foretelling, that is predicting the future, than forthtelling. Go and challenge what is wrong. Because the assumption underneath the prophecy of Israel is the covenant. If you like, the covenant could be described as a constitution. Do not oppress the poor. God is interested in justice. God is interested in all that make the society augur well. So first, what is prophecy? As far as prophecy within the Old Testament and later on inherited in Christian tradition, is not, and I stress, is not about foretelling, predicting the future. For the Old Testament prophets, prophecy, it is about forthtelling. And why is the forthtelling so important? The prophets believed that on the Mount Sinai, God revealed himself to Israel. And the way this revelation came about was codified in the Ten Commandments that serve as, if you like, for want of a better description, that serves as a constitution. So if I were to compare prophets in the understanding of the Old Testament to any other tradition in modern times, I will compare them to journalists. If journalists are doing their jobs well and they are not interested in fake news, sensationalism, sense of failure, and embarrassment, which has become the characteristics of modern day journalism. If journalists are doing their job well, as they were meant to be doing in a constitutionalized democratic society, journalists will come close to the job of a prophet. The job of a journalist is hold those in power accountable. And that was what people who presented themselves as prophets intended to do. It's so often that whenever we hear about people talking about prophecy, what they fail to understand is that they are talking about something that has not been taught true. Because many traditions had divination system, there is always confusion between divination and prophecy. But if we are talking about prophecy, the prophets were not divining to look so much into the future than what are the consequences of failing to honor and fulfill the laws as has been codified in the covenant. So the prophet's authority, the prophetic authority, did not lie in the prophets themselves. I stress, the prophetic authority did not lie in the prophets themselves. The prophetic authority lied within the constitution, if you like, or in the case of the Old Testament tradition, within the covenant, which says, treat the just, behave justly, love mercy, make sure that those who are widows are cared for, make sure that those who are poor are well looked after. The moment anybody within the Old Testament in leadership begin to flout the law, it is the job of the prophet, just as it is the job of a journalist, to hold those who hold power to account. And often the confusion about the prophecy which we attributed to the future is this. Whenever the prophets are saying that if you fail to do this, this will be the consequences for you, often the consequences is already spelled out somewhere in the Old Testament, somewhere it comes with the law. So for example, when David tricked the wife of Bathsheba, and then also killed the husband Uriah, the interesting thing was this. When Prophet Nathan confronted David, he told David that David, there was a man who had many sheep, and then he had a visitor. And when, he needed to slaughter a lamb for this visitor, he went to this poor man who has only one, lamb, and stole from him and then slaughtered it for his visitor. And David immediately said, oh, that man must die. And Nathan said, thou art the man, you are the man. In other words, David, you are in authority, you have to behave appropriately, and you have behaved badly. So prophecy is about holding people to account. And I think the danger that has characterized prophecy recently is people confuse divination with prophecy. But if we are talking about prophecy as is spelled out in the Old Testament studies, it is about accountability. It's not so much about predicting the future. If there was a future, it is about the consequences of failing to perform the due assignment that you have been given. So, for example, in the case of David that I have mentioned, he said, because you have treated this poor man badly, and you have not only treated him badly by taking his wife from him when you have many, you have killed him as well. So the sword will never depart from your household. And throughout David's life, the sword, including his own son, Absalom, pursuing him and driving him out of his, kingdom. So prophecy is not, and I stress, is not so much about foretelling the future where somebody tell you that, then we will call our weather forecasters prophets, because our weather forecasters now are able to tell us that it is going to snow. It is going to do the, are they prophets? No, because it's a different form of prediction. Prophets, as we understand them in the Old Testament, they are about accountability. And therefore, any prophecy that presents itself that is not about moral accountability is questionable. I repeat, prophecy is about accountability, and any form of prophecy that does not call for accountability is not prophecy at all, because that was not what it was meant to do. And when we come to the Old Testament prophecy, there is also imagination, which has made reference to. The imagination works like this. If Yahweh was here and now, the Old Testament believer will ask, what will we like to see? So prophets were using their imagination to ask the question, if Yahweh was in charge of our society here and now, how will the poor be treated? If Yahweh was in charge here and now, how would the widow be treated? If Yahweh was in charge here and now, how would those who are on the margin of society perceive themselves? So prophecies or prophets, let me put it this way, prophets were imagining a society which Yahweh has promised to be in charge. And Yahweh promise to Israel is about justice, about fairness, about people living in peace with one another. So Yahweh, the prophets were always imagining, if Yahweh was in charge here and now, how would our society look like? So prophetic proclamation is an attempt to imagine the world as if Yahweh is in charge. It's not about telling somebody who is going to win a football match. It's not about telling somebody, that this year somebody is going to die. We all die. It's not about who is going to win election. No. Prophecy is about conscientizing society. If Yahweh was in charge, how will society look like? And the characteristics of Yahweh, is always what gives boundaries to prophecy. The characteristics of kindness, the characteristics of, loving one another, the characteristics of making sure that the hungry and the destitute are cared for. So prophetic proclamation is an attempt to imagine the world as though Yahweh, the creator of the world, the deliverer of Israel, were a real character, an effective agent in the world. That is what prophecy was meant to achieve. So to some extent, one could even argue that there is a relationship between prophecy and political institution, because the prophets were holding those in authority accountable. They were a thorn in the flesh of people who were meant to deliver what the Constitution, and I'm using the Constitution as a shorthand to Israel's understanding of the law and the commandments. So whenever we are thinking about prophets, we have to think about what is it that we are saying. Are we talking about divination? Are we talking about necromancy? Or are we talking about prophecy as was understood within the Israel's religious and political history? So the prophets were more or less reformers. The prophets were more or less activists, calling the society back to the covenant. And the covenant is about justice. The covenant is about the poor being looked after. The covenant is about the widows, making sure that they are not trampled upon. In a society that if you didn't have somebody to look after you, then you are often looked down upon. And what is so amazing is about Nathan situation that I made reference to, was that Nathan had the confidence to challenge one of the most powerful people of the land about his action, because thou shalt not envy thy neighbor's wife is spelled out in the Constitution. And by David taking away, Uriah's wife, He has envied his neighbor's wife, and therefore he has flouted the constitution. And the job of the prophet in particular context is called David to account. So my kind of destiny is that whenever you see any prophecy that is boots licking, and I call it boots licking, it's not prophecy at all. It's a false prophecy. And I will give you an example. If you read the book of 1 Kings chapter 22, there is a story there where a prophet, called Micah is loved because, he will always tell the king the truth. And equally, there are those who are in the king's court, by name, champion by name Zedekiah, who kind of was always, giving the king a kind of bootlicking prophecy. Oh, king, when you go, you will succeed. Oh, king, when you go, and Micah will always say, when you go, you'll be defeated. Because A, you have not prepared your army. 2, you have not invested in the soldiers that are meant to even fight for you. And your reign is injustice. How do you expect people should spend their life defending the states when they are treated badly? So prophecy is about foretelling in the sense of making sure that the constitution of the land is respected. And I want to take you back to the relationship between economic development, political stability, and prophecy. And I have no other example to give than the book of Amos. In the book of Amos, we are told that as Israel became very prosperous, one of the consequences that happened was that the poor, the widows, and the marginalized were being treated poorly. And lo and behold, Prophet Amos, who is not even from a household of prophets, emerged. And then when he emerged, one of his responsibility was to challenge a system where the political, economic stability that is there is only being enjoyed by the few. And those who are on the margins of society are being treated, unfairly, are being trampled upon. One of the quotes of Amos, it says that you sell the poor for a pair of sandals. You sell the poor for a pair of sandals unless you change your ways, unless you repent, before you realize you've gone into exile. And surely they went into exile. It's not because Amos saw the future. The consequences, the sociological consequences, the political consequences of any society that doesn't respect the human rights, the rights of the poor, the rights of the marginalized, the rights of those who are leading the institutions to find their paths to nurture the next generation of leaders. Any society that neglects his or her obligation toward those people who serve the society, that society by its very nature will collapse. So sometimes when prophets are talking, they are not talking so much about, something from the air. They are talking about the consequences of the action. Give me any society which has maltreated its people and hasn't led to, chaos and hasn't led to destruction. A society that maltreats people, by definition, is on its path to destruction. So the prophets were often seeing the consequences of an action which has already been spelled out, in the covenant. One of the wonderful passages in the Old Testament is Micah asking, what have I required from you, O humans, that you should love mercy, love justice, and to walk humbly with your God? So I will end here by just making the following remark. Prophecy is not so much about foretelling. Prophecy is about foretelling. It is about holding those people who are meant to be dispensing justice, to dispense fairness, to make sure that the poor, the hungry, and those who are on the margins of society are cared for, because that was what was offered in the law. So if you like, prophets are journalists holding those in society, those in authority, to account. And finally, whenever we are thinking about prophecy, we should never confuse prophecy with divination. We should never confuse prophecy with necromancy. And we should never confuse prophecy with so much about predicting the future as predicting the consequences of a bad behavior. And, the laws of the universe is such that if you throw a ball to the wall, it bounces back to you. And often prophets are there to remind us about the law of the universe, which impinges on all of us when we don't obey them. So I will end here, and then probably we shall take the conversation as it move forward. Thank you very much.
Okay, Dr. Shen, we know that mostly the Old Testament prophets did not foretell, but actually talked about, as you said, creating an infrastructure within which the society could be free and fair, if I can put it that way. But do we have vestiges of foretelling among the Old Testament prophecies? And how do you explain that?
The foretelling. So, for example,
sorry, Daniel, 1 second. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, if we can just pause for a second for me. Foretelling, necromancy, divination. I would want you, if possible, if you can use their everyday meanings, so that those who are not theologians don't also miss out. Because when we talk about foretelling and divination, and if you get time, if you can also explain the difference between divination, necromancy, and then prophecy. Thank you.
Okay.
So when I say foretelling, it's so much about predicting the future. You are predicting the future. This and that and that and that will happen. Foretelling is confronting the wrongs in society about breakages of the law that you are meant to obey. So, for example, often journalists are if they are doing their job properly, they are foretelling. They are foretelling in the sense that their job is to defend the Constitution. And the job of the prophets is to defend the laws of the covenant. They didn't plug their ideas simply from the air. their ideas and their authority was embedded in the laws of Yahweh, which demands justice for the poor, which demands fairness for the widow, which demand that women in society are treated fairly. So whereas foretelling is more about prediction to the future, foretelling is like holding, if you like, let's use school as an example. In every school, you have the rules in the classroom. If you appoint a class captain or a class leader, one of the jobs of the class captain is to make sure that, for want of a better description, referee the laws in the classroom. Refereeing in the sense that make sure that people are meant to be doing what they are doing. So if the class captain goes to somebody and say, you are not supposed to do that because the laws of the classroom, the regulation within the school is meant to be X, Y, Z. They are holding the person or the student who is flouting the regulation of the school to account. And often that is what prophets were meant to be doing. And often the reason why a lot of people think that prophets were foretelling rather than forthtelling is because they always spell out the consequences that will come with people's action. So, for example, when the prophets were prophesying that if Israel treats the poor, like Amos, if you continue to treat the poor the way you are treated, it says, and I quote, you cows of Bashan. And by the way, the cows of Bashan were really, really fat cows because they were feeding on one of the most fertile lands. You cows of Bashan, because of your behavior, you will be led into exile. It's not so much that Amos is predicting the exile as he is spelling out the consequences of treating the poor badly. So the reason why often people think that, the prophets were foretelling the future. The foretelling, if you do a critical reflection on what they were foretelling, which comes after their foretelling, is so much about spelling out the consequences of the action. So, well, let's take Moses. Yahweh says to Moses, I will make you my prophet. You go to Pharaoh and you tell Pharaoh, Pharaoh, let my people go. If Pharaoh does not recognize the need to free my people and continue to oppress them, then these are the consequences that will follow their refusal. And therefore, the 10 plagues, or is it 10 or 7? I've forgotten which of them. The plagues that followed, whether it is Egyptians losing their first son, whether it is frog which were coming in the narratives, whichever way we want to, approach it, what the narrative is there to say is that when you are being held accountable about oppression and you don't listen to, the consequences are these. So there is often something that they will speak about in the future, yes. But the future always belongs to God. So for an Israelite, for the Old Testament believer, the future is in the hands of God. But what they know is their responsibility is to obey the laws of the covenant. And when you are poor, or when you are a woman, when you are a slave, or when you are nobody in society, often who speaks for you? And the job of the prophet is to speak on your behalf so that you will have a voice. They were the voice of the voiceless. And they only foretell the consequences after they have done the foretelling. So the difference between fore and foretelling: fore looks too much into the future. Foretelling talks about what is happening here and now, and the consequences that become foretelling if you don't stop here and now. Divination is when we go to somebody and say, can you predict about my life? Can you look into the mirror? Can you look into whatever we look into and talk about the future? And I will talk about a little bit later on in the conversation about how when you come from a culture where it used to be the tradition that you go to some whoever has the power to look into your palm or look into your hands and predict the future, the assumption is that prophecy, becomes looking into the future. But unless we are looking at prophecy in a different context within the Old Testament tradition and New Testament tradition that I'm talking about, if prophecy are to be meant for the understanding of the biblical tradition or the Jewish tradition, the understanding of prophecy in the Old Testament context is about holding people to accountable. Divination is about individual concern, and that is not what, so much prophecy was meant to do.
Yeah,
Okay.
Doug, beyond the indictment and judgment, we also have the prophets talking about the coming future restoration, the coming future restoration. And in this regard, we have prophets who proclaimed a unified message that said that the era of salvation will be manifested in the New Testament as we have it.
So I mean, one has to be very, very careful about how the New Testament believers read into the Old Testament. Because, I mean, for example, when we read, and a virgin shall conceive and give birth to a child, and the child shall be named Emmanuel. A Christian reading that text will say that that text refers to Jesus. But if you go to any Jewish tradition, the text has nothing to do with Jesus. The prophet was telling King Hezekiah that I'm telling you, by the time that Assyrian and Egyptian alliance have come to fruition, just like a woman give birth and the child is weaned after 7 years, this alliance is going to be like that. They are going to wean each other off, and very soon the alliance is going to fall apart. But when Christians read it, they attribute it differently. So for the Old Testament believer, a lot of the prophecies that we read, so for example, when you go to Isaiah chapter 42 to 45, Cyrus, who is not even a Jew, Cyrus, who is not a Jew, is chosen by God. And God says to him, I have chosen you as my Messiah. You will do this and this and this and this and that. And Cyrus was a rare historical figure who actually brought Israel back. After Israel has fallen from 720 BCE, it was Cyrus who brought them back to the land. And for us, when we are reading it, we think that the prophets, it's about prophecy in the future. But in their own historical period, that thing that was promised by prophet Isaiah, that when you have been on the land and you have been disciplined, you will be brought back to the land. I will raise a man called Cyrus. Cyrus will show you how fairness, how integrity to one's word leads to liberation. And when you come back to your land, you will learn a lesson from that. So I completely agree that there is a bit of people who looks into the future, but the future is not separate from the present, because it is the present that they are concerned about. And you fail to do what you are meant to be do at present, then the future consequences will follow.
Okay. Thanks so much, Daniel. I think we now want to open it up. So everyone on the call, please feel free to ask questions. Feel free to post your questions. Or if you want to speak, just go ahead, unmute, and then put your point across. If you have a suggestion, feel free to put it across. A contribution, it's all welcome.
Well, my question goes to Dr. Ishan. You have stated that a new definition for prophets. Usually what we think about is that the main function of a prophet is to divine the future. So divination has been the definition for prophecy, as far as some of us know. And now I don't know whether you have looked at this text in Amos chapter 3, verse 7. It says, surely the sovereign Lord does nothing without revealing his plan to his servants, the prophets. That's my question to Dr. Ishan. How do you react to that?
So
my second question goes to the first speaker. I've forgotten the name.
Charles.
Yes, sir. I'm asking whether it is possible at all for anybody at all to look into the future and know the future. I mean, I asked the question because I wonder if God himself has any clue about the future. And if he did, when he created Adam and Eve, did he know that they were going to fall and then go and eat the apple? Or when he liberated Noah, did he know that the consequence was that we were going to return to square one and then sin? Or when he tested Job, did he know that he was going to pass? And if he was going to pass, why the bother? So all these things make me believe that not even God knows the future. And if God himself doesn't know the future, what is the evidence that any of his creators know the future? So I have two questions in one for the two speakers.
Yeah. I do believe that, let me make this premise. My belief in Christianity is this, that our knowledge of God continues to improve or increase. And what we knew yesterday is not the same as we know today. And the second thing is, I don't believe that by the nature of the human being whom God created in his own image, and that makes him a living being that looks outward positively to try to do things for themselves, God will determine us, will predetermine our future. That we are at liberty to engage with God to add to what he's given us, which means we are supposed to add value to whatever God has given us. So every day, our knowledge increases, we improve in our actions and attitudes, we get to know God better, and we do better by ourselves, which means also that we are forever engaged in this enterprise with God. We are partners. Having said all these, I come to the issue of foretelling. I do believe that at some point in our history, or the history of the Bible, based on our belief systems and the little that we thought we knew about God. The only way we move forward was for these prophets to be able not to only remain guidance of the society, but also to tell us, to predict what is going to happen by our actions. If we don't do good by the people we are supposed to guide in our society, evil is going to happen. If we don't come together as a united force, other nations are going to fight us, and they are going to kill us off or bring us into slavery. So they are able to predict these things based on what they see around us. Today, I don't think I need a prophet to tell me anything about tomorrow, because if I need to, I'll get a weatherman to tell me about how the weather is going to be today and tomorrow. If I need to know how well my business is going to do, I'm going to sit down with a business analyst or someone, or I'm going to get the software off the shelf, Excel, and be able to do my own analysis to predict how my business is going to do based on the variables I have in front of me. If I'm going to learn about the future of our climate, our world, I'll go to those scientists who are looking into years of how the world or the climate has been going, and they'll be able to tell me about the climate change, how fast our climate is going to change and its effect. So I live in a world whereby the knowledge God has given us, we call something technology. And by these technological tools, I'm able to predict the future better than any prophet can do today. So to me, as Professor Dr. Shen is saying, foretelling is not the issue today. If for a prophet, if I need a prophet, I need a prophet who will play the role of a journalist, as Dr. Shen said. I need somebody who can go out there and analyze what the government is doing to tell me exactly what is going on, so I can make a decision on who to vote for, who to support, whose actions to support, and whose I should not support. I don't need a prophet to tell me that. I would need the journalist to tell me these people are stealing these things, or I would like the journalist to also stand and speak truth to power on my behalf. And I need the journalist to continuously educate me. And that is also the role of the minister. The role of the minister should be, or the Christian minister should not be someone who tells me how my country is going to do in the future based on his divination or his conversation with God. I want my minister to be able to tell me that this is how things are going to go if we don't come out and speak truth to power, because those who are in power are taking us for a ride. That is the role I expect from my minister. If he's a prophet in that sense, I'll go with it. But if it's a prophet in the sense of divination, I call it laziness, and I will not be part of it.
Okay, can we have a response to Amos 3:7, please?
I mean, Amos 3:17, God does not do anything without revealing it to his prophet. Is simply a way of the writer saying that God always wants people to change their ways. God doesn't delight in the punishment per se. So that passage that Dr. Safo, you quoted, it's in itself. It's in itself a way of saying that the reason why the prophets were there was to go and warn the people before the judge. The reason why, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
No, the reason why the judgment, the passage, God does not do anything without revealing it to its prophet. It's a way of the writer saying, because God does not delight, God doesn't delight in the punishment. God wants humanity to repent, to do the right thing, so that at all way possible, the consequences of an action could be avoided. So that text itself, in fact, underline the point that I was making, that before the prediction and the consequences come, I am sending you to go and warn them that if they don't stop what they are doing, this is going to be the consequences. One of the things that is so interesting in Israel's history is that almost every time that something is going to lead them into destruction, there is always warning that if you don't stop what you are doing, if you don't stop what you are doing, if you don't follow the law, these are the consequences. So the text is a shortcut of saying, look, God doesn't delight in punishing anybody. God rather wants you, the prophet, to tell them to do the right thing, so that all the evil consequences that may come as attendant result of their failure will be avoided.
All right, Daniel. Hello, Daniel.
I'm here.
Yes, I mean, am I right to say that what by your interpretation of Amos 3:7, what we mean by God revealing, it's about these prophets knowing the precepts of God so that they are able to see the deviations. Is that the right way?
Yeah, the precepts of God has already been spelled out in the covenant.
Mm-hmm.
The covenant is treat the poor justly, pay the right wages, the labor deserve his wages, make sure that, the widow are not maltreated. Do not put anything in the do not put anything in the way of a blind person so that that blind person will fall over them. In other words, make sure that even the disabled within the society are properly cared for. So they knew you can never be a prophet in Israel without understanding the precepts of God, which is spelled out in the covenant. So the precept of God was not something that you are going to plug it from the air. The precepts of God, as the Old Testament prophets were foretelling, are spelled out in the covenant. So when Amos was telling the northern kingdom of, you cows of Bashan, if you don't stop bullying the poor, you will go into exile. The precepts was already in the covenant that make sure that the poor are paid well. Make sure that those who are slaves are treated well. All these things were there.
Okay, thank you. I think maybe we would also open up to others, but if you got another chance, yourself and Charles, maybe you want to say a bit more about, what I'm thinking about is, why was a prophet, are the prophets, were they the only people that knew the precepts? So it's like prophets were given a special place. So it sounds like prophets were quite knowledgeable people. It's not just about, like we say, gifted to mean that you can sleep and see things, you can pray, and then God will drop something in your heart, that sort of thing. So I think it will open up, and then when other questions come, you can follow up. Let's have others contribute in place. If you have a
Nana
question.
Davis' hand is up.
Oh, sure, Nana, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. This is my first participation, and I'm delighted. It's very interesting conversation going on. Can you all hear me?
Yes, Nana, we can hear you.
Okay. So, as I said, I'm delighted to be here. And then I listened to both speakers, and I just wanted to make a comment, which I believe would also be commented on by the speakers, and that's in regards to the role of prophecy in. Can somebody can you mute, please? How we will be able to, or how we will understand how this biblical presence of prophesying have been exploited by contemporary politicians. And I remember our speaker, Akefi, mentioned Donald Trump, and how even in America, I mean, as America had its election in 2016, was it 2020? Ghanaians and other African church leaders and evangelists and prophets were focused on prophesying about how Donald Trump was going to win. And I was looking forward to hearing about why that was the case, which is why I wanted to make this comment. Because now here was a politician who realized, and I don't want to be political, I am apolitical. Here was a politician who wanted to exploit all categories or all constituents within the American electorate so he could amass as many votes as possible. But it was so glaring that he wasn't going to be able to win the Black election. So then how were they going to do that? By utilizing the prophecies and perspectives and ideological or religious notions about Israel and exploiting that to his advantage. So we had all our church leaders going, how was I able to semi or partially confirm this? Immediately after the election, a Ghanaian, or I think a Nigerian church member of one of the big mega churches in Nigeria went to one of my brother's shops here and said, oh, you know what? We were advised that if we voted against Donald Trump, we were going to be excommunicated from the church. And I said, aha. So this was the reason. This was why a man who had no belief in God, who, unlike other, of course, and all the politicians had their respective negativities, but this guy, a man who patronized prostitution, a man who believed in all the vices that Christians preached against, was able to exploit the religious community or the Christian community to his advantage, to the extent of influencing even Africans who could not speak his language. And I'm talking about those Ghanaian leaders who cannot speak English, and yet were claiming that they were going to have meetings with Donald Trump. So why am I going with this? First of all, we have so much been misled by these so-called prophets. And I was a bit disappointed, and I applaud the work you've done. But I was a bit disappointed that we didn't call a spade a spade. You were so mild in condemning what they have done so far by turning the church into money-making machines where they would, deceive the masses. And of course, as many sociologists and Marxists have already said, with the, religion being the opium of the masses, exploiting religion to amass wealth whilst making poor get poorer. Why are the leaders, those who really know what is going on, why have they sat back and not condemned so that every year, until the police in Ghana decided to stop these annual prophecies, some people were always going to panic about what was going to be heard about them, and to some extent making sure that they went as far as probably killing to make their prophecies come to pass. All right. So yes, these prophecies have become money-making instruments for churches. Politicians are utilizing it, and Donald Trump, a big case study for us all to understand. My comment, a quick one.
Thank you very much. I want to make three quick responses. One is the most religion can become ideology. And when ideology is going to function, it depends on the belief systems in place. I find it quite sad that as you articulated, even the very people, I mean, I find it difficult to understand somebody who was even going to take the health care, which they term as Obamacare. I mean,
Yep.
I don't understand American Christianity very well, so I'm not here to make a judgment. But based on the prophetic principle that we've talked about, I would have thought, and probably I have to, indemnify myself by adding the word, as somebody who naively don't understand the American system. But as an ordinary citizen from UK, I would have thought that if there are poor people, you would rather prefer, if there was any prophecy at all, you would have thought that there was going to be somebody that people would think about who would defend the poor. But
See,
often that is not the case. And as I said in my comments, any prophecy that doesn't stand up for what is right is a suspect. Because there are false prophets. And false prophecy is when religion is being manipulated to suit a certain end. The second thing is that, and Charles alluded to it, religion is also an evolutionary, like all aspects of our lives. Once upon a time, even in Britain, there were people who were prophesying when the Black Death was killing people in the medieval England, that the end of the world is coming. That is why the Black Death has come in England, forgetting that it was the sewage system that has breed, venom, rats that are spreading the Black Death. And in the end, it is not a prophecy that prevented the Black Death. It is scientific solution that, saved the day. So what am I saying? Every society at a developmental stage in their history have made reference to some kind of divination, some kind of looking for necromancy, sources of knowledge to solve a problem. That is not prophecy. Going back to Africa, and I will add Latin America, because I was teaching today and a Latin American student, made a similar comment that what is happening in Africa is happening in Latin America. Why is it that wherever you find poverty and ignorance, prophecy triumph? Why is it? And my answer to that is that when people blend ignorance, confidence, and they articulate it with arrogance, the result is deadly. How come that it would take an IGP to rule that this year, or as it happened in 31st night last year, nobody should go and give crazy prophecies? And we didn't have crazy prophecies. Is it not even an indictment of our understanding of prophecy in our African context? So I mean, I without being political, but talking about prophecy will always lead you to the political ends. The essence of our African Christianity at the moment is that certain African concepts, and I'm not saying they are right or wrong, but it depends on how you want to interpret it or understand it. I mean, we have confused divination in churches with prophecy. People go to somebody, oh, prophet, prophesy over me. That is divination. That is not prophecy. Because prophets are there to hold people accountable. That is the job of a prophet. So I agree, Nana, that we have a situation in Africa and around the world where religion has become ideological. I mean, how ridiculous is that the very people where people are coming from in America, where people are coming from in Africa to America, immigration and everything, Donald Trump prevented it. Yet we were told by the woman that I've forgotten her name during a prayer meeting that angels are coming from Africa. Angels are coming from Africa. Angels are coming from Africa. How is that a prophecy?
Yeah, that's because they had, they were so sure that if no segment or no constituency believed that Donald Trump was the chosen one, Africans would believe it because they connected him with the recognition of Jerusalem in the middle, wherever it is, right? They also believed that there are so many Africans in this community, in this country, and the majority of those Africans are evangelical Christians, and they believed that irrespective of how much Donald Trump disrespected us, how much he didn't want to have anything to do with Africa, they believed that just by mentioning Israel, just by mentioning that he was God's chosen one because he was the first president to have come in recent times to recognize Jerusalem, that was going to really propel him to victory. That was all they were concerned about. And so they believed that by continuing to say the angels of Africa, the Africans here were still going to believe and probably stupidly follow the claims that the elections were stolen. Of course, where do they typically steal elections in this world? In Africa, of course, and definitely we were going to buy whatever lie they put forth that the elections had been stolen. It was all a part of the ploy to make sure that he came back as president.
And perhaps this is where, when Charles was speaking, he attributed prophetic role to some of our ministers. How many of our ministers stood in the pulpit and have the confidence to say that this is not how prophecy should be perceived? So it is incumbent on us, and it is in the millennialism, that is any prediction about the future. It has dominated historical periods throughout Christian history. And whenever that period has happened, it is because there is so much ignorance around. So it is incumbent on all of us. Now, how do we make sure that we educate our people so that they come to understand that it is important that one, where there is ignorance, people can manipulate religion at any time. I mean, I find it difficult to understand that you can put money in a collection bowl for a prophet to prophesy over you. How is that prophecy? I don't understand. So when ignorance and is there, it is there for people who are manipulative, people who are controlling, to exploit it. You will call Africa a shithole, but you are prepared for angels in that shithole to come and help you to win an election. May God help us all.
Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, who wants to speak? Is somebody
KB.
ready? All
KB.
right.
Yeah, two examples that I want to share. So I agree with Dr. Shen. The bottom line is leadership and governance. Two experiences. One, I was part of the team that came up with how to manage and eradicate guinea worms in the country, 84, 85. And then 89 and 1990, I spent 2 years in the whole Sifi region with National Mobilization Program and Ministry of Health on the 6 killer diseases, right? It's all about ignorance. We're able to bring deaths among mothers and children down within 2 years. And then within 3 years, guinea worm was eradicated from Ghana. It's all about ignorance. So where do our governments fit into this? If they don't, and we may want to ask a question, why did it take the IGP to issue that instruction, not the government? So our governments are failing us and creating the vacuum for these prophets to have a full day. Simple.
May I respond to that, please, if you don't mind? And I apologize. I'm sure my background is a bit noisy. I'm doing yard work. It's very beautiful out here.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Anna.
All right, thank you. So the question was, why did the government not do that? I see IGP as being a part of the government because it's the unit of the state that is responsible for law enforcement. So yes, I would say that yes, it was. But then the fact that it did not come until Dampari came into power also speaks to why we have gotten this far, because at the end of each year, we have political evangelists, let me call them that way, making statements in support of the leaders that they trust and believe will the leaders who probably have given them more money. All right. So how are you going to stop it when Nigel Gazi is saying, come so and so, you are going to win the election, or Bempa, I'm not able to mention that man's name, is always saying this person is going to win, and the angels have told me, and that this so and so lost because Abraham had a meeting with this or that person. They're not going to do that because these prophecies are in favor of the individual governments, and they exploit them. They don't just exploit the leaders of these churches. They exploit their members also, because, as I said, even in the case of Donald Trump, Pastor Chris was in Nigeria, but was telling his followers here that, and don't quote me because this was not a scientific research, it was just somebody thing I heard one of his members say. Now, he was in Nigeria and was warning his followers not to vote against Donald Trump. Why? That is how bad we have come. They are all involved in this, so they are not going to be able to stop it. It had to take a very forceful and a very confident, independent law enforcement leader to do what Dampari did. But I don't know how long he's going to last, because if he continues to take initiatives that are against the powers that be, he's going to either be removed permanently or be removed out of office.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as you said, it will also take an honest, independent, courageous Christian leader to also point out these ills in our society. And I tell you, we are grappling with all these things because of one big thing: our understanding of Christianity. This afternoon, through Dr. Shen, we've gotten to know that 95% of the prophecies in the Old Testament were largely about how to live, or the life we live. How we can get together and make sure that we all live together peacefully and in harmony. That is what all these prophecies were about. Only 5% talked about the future restoration and the coming Messianic age, which actually, in fact, it's the Christians who claim that. The Old Testament people, if you go to them, the Israelites will tell you we had nothing to do about Christianity. The Muslims will tell you almost the same, that even Christ, who they consider was as a prophet in not forth-telling, but in forth-telling, telling how to live with those that were not considered to be Jewish people, or considered to be any children, people who were sick, people, the sinners and all those things. Jesus was teaching us how to live peacefully among all those people. So even though we know this, yet the belief or the knowledge of that scintilla of prophecies about the Messianic age seems to dominate the conversation. And it dominates the conversation because we don't understand how to relate to Christianity or how Christianity relates to everyday life. We still have a supernatural view.
Okay.
Yeah, we still have this supernatural view that we live that Christian life in a domain which is esoteric, beyond us, that what we do here has nothing to do with that Christian life that we want to live. And with that, we entrust so much power in people who make so much claims that we cannot prove because they are all subjective. As long as these people can stand up and make their claims because of lack of our understanding and even believe in ourselves and what our faith is, we give up all our thinking and follow them.
Right.
So
Thanks.
until we come to understand one thing, that human beings are supposed to be, or Christians, let's put it that way, are supposed to be involved in this ongoing revolution that turns people from just non-entities into people who are citizens and are going to work together to make life easier for you and me. That we are going to participate in God's ongoing narrative, which is what narrative? To bring the kingdom of God here on earth. Until we are willing to do that and have Christianity be the life we live, every day that we live, we'll continue to live and have a supernatural view of Christianity and have our world be dominated by divination and the forces of good and evil.
All right.
Uncle Charles.
Charles,
yeah.
1 second.
Just a question.
Yeah, 1 second. KB.
Yes.
You've got a question. Okay,
yes.
if you quick so that AB has got his hands up for some time now. Okay, go on.
Okay.
Yes. KB, go ahead.
Then where is the problem? Is it the interpretation of the word, or we are using a wrong book, Bible? And whose Bible is that?
I think our Christian leaders are being lazy because what is happening today are the same reasons that led to the Reformation and are the same reasons that led to the Renaissance. We've seen it before. When we have abdicated our responsibility as religious leaders, and because of our need for money, for fame, and for everything that is very human here, we are not speaking the truth to our people. It is not popular. I will tell you today that it is not popular for anyone in Ghana to stand out and say, hey, I'm a minister, but I don't believe in these prophecies. Our method for the Methodists, our leaders have been trained theologically. And I do believe they do understand the roles that they have. And actually, they know that our experience here is a life we live with the grace of God. That by this grace, we're able to do A, B, C, D. And this grace urges us on every day to do better, to improve, to progress. They know that. Why on earth would you think a Methodist minister will get up and say that there are accidents happening on our highways, so let's go and fast and pray so that God will stop those accidents? It's meaningless. But the minister will say it, and we all say amen, and we'll go and fast and pray. Even though we know that those issues can be resolved by the roads and safety people who may have to go and redesign the road or prevent people from selling the alcohol along the rest areas so these drivers will not get drunk and get involved in these accidents. We know these, but why are we so paralyzed that we can't say it? That we sit on, we look on, and everything is supernatural, everything is prayer, and everything is fasting.
Right, but Charles, thank you. Let's hear. Is AB still ready to put his question across, or?
Yeah, I think AB is a and
Okay.
thank you for allowing me to speak. This is my first time of coming, and it's interesting discussion. I think Charles made mention a little bit about what I wanted to comment, and my comment is the ministers in Ghana, especially the so-called Christian Council or the Pentecostal Council, those ministers in Ghana are the ones who are failing us. They are not telling the truth. And if we hide behind the scenes and not tell them, and sometimes I personally get disappointed because there are some people that we were trained with who are now in the organized institution as reverend ministers, and they are also following the same line. So it's happening to hear that. And those people are leading our people astray. Like Charles said that the minister knows very well that road accidents are happening because of bad roads and other things, but they will tell people to go and fast and pray. And those ministers have to be chastised. And I think at one point in time, the revolution that took place in centuries ago is going to happen. And we will start beating them. We will go to church and we will beat people at the church, like Jesus did to those people who were selling things at the temple. And it's about time we rise up and chastise them. Thank you very much.
Anyway, we got Inkum. I think that's my brother Queen. Reverend.
Okay. Yes. Good evening to you all.
Good evening.
I've listened through, and I think we are raising so many interesting issues. But until we get the fundamentals right, one, the African, as we are told, is religious. It is not the white man that introduced Nyankopon to us. We knew Nyankopon before the white man came. It's about our philosophy and our values. As for religion, it has always been used to exploit, whether Christianity, Islam, African traditional religion. Now, no Paul was before Christianity. The corruption in our
institutions, in our culture.
In our culture. I mean, corruption is part of us. Perhaps what I'm saying is that if we use Eurocentric definition for corruption, then we are all corrupt. Perhaps we should define corruption differently to the African. On prophetism, it is with us. We've been going to Ebisa, and it's not about today that we go to people to tell me about the future. What will happen to us? We are coming to begin our farming season. We need to do some rituals for us to have good rains. So yes, a whole lot of issues. Sometimes you may be inclined to believe that is a Christianity of wrong interpretation, but I would want to believe that in the Islamic countries, using false skills, it becomes part of, but the Ghanaian Muslim is different from the behavior in terms of behavior I'm talking about. Will be different from an American Muslim, but we are reading the same Quran. The Ghanaian, indeed, I've not been to UK before, but I know that people come, they go to churches, pray. Holding false documentation, entering UK and praying for a good visa. in the church, Obaya announcement here on the one, but in the house of God. Right. So it's a good discourse we have to start and think about our society, the Ghanaians believing in superpower, the esoteric power, because we are not able to comprehend. As for our present situation, whether weather forecast would help us not to rely on God for whatever. Well, the question would then ask that because of technology, and does God become
Right.
irrelevant in our lifestyle? Thank you.
Reverend, thank you so much. Your thing it was going slow, but I heard the question that does God become relevant in the era of technological improvement or innovation? Let's leave that for Daniel and Charles, but let's allow Mary to make her contribution, and then they can come in and respond. Mary, please go ahead. Mary, unfortunately, we can hardly hear you. If you may,
Mary, can you move? Mary, can you move from where you are? I can hear you.
Is it better now?
A bit better, yes.
It's better. Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
And I speak as a Methodist, and so my question will go to Reverend. Reverend, I'm yet to see a Methodist minister engage in prophecies in our churches. However, when there is a revival or any program, they invite evangelists and they come in to preach and they engage in all kinds of prophecies. And my question would be, if we as a Methodist church, our ministers are well trained, they understand theology, and so they wouldn't do that, why then do they bring in evangelists to come and do same in our churches? Thank you.
Well, I would have left this for Dr. Wilson to answer, but just look at it, and in all honesty, are we bringing in the evangelists to preach to us, or we are bringing the evangelists for other reasons? Is the evangelist going to come in to preach to us, to help us know our Bible better, to know Christ better? Or we are bringing in the evangelist for some other reasons?
Hello.
Yes.
I missed the question. You see, the disadvantage of being in a rural place. I don't have a stable connectivity. So if our sister can repeat the question.
She's saying that the Methodists ministers don't prophesy, but during occasions we bring the evangelists in for them to prophesy. And why do we do that? Since it looks like we have a better understanding of the Bible.
Oh, I think from the discussion, it's prophecy. We do foretelling a lot. If that is part of prophecy, then I think the Methodist minister does almost every Sunday. At least I've not stood there to say, yes, foretelling, that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
So this year, I remember in one of the announcements in the church, the steward said, Prophet Wilson, just commenting on what I said in December, just called me. And if we foretell, and definitely, if you study the Bible very well, you would be able to foretell always. And it's a matter of nomenclature. Maybe we may have to change our names to Reverend Prophets. But we do
but I do believe what this lady is saying is talking about foretelling, telling the future.
Hold on there. Hold on. The emergence of evangelists in our church, basically, it started with this healing. Are you getting it? Not the prophecy, the healing ministry, where I feel Oduya focus for on Sabbath tomorrow. So somebody who would put their hand on me, pray, and I get my healing. Right. Evangelism that has become established in the church. Same just healing and deliverance.
Right. Reverend Wilson, unfortunately, your line is really, hello, hello, your line is really not helping. If you don't mind and you can type into the chat, maybe we can follow you from there.
So I think hello.
Yeah. Your line is really not coming through. So if you can type for us, or maybe in a summary, we can pick it up and then we tell everybody. We can hardly hear you now.
Hello.
Unfortunately.
Okay.
All right. So let's Nana. We can see Nana's hand. Nana, if you want to come on.
But her question hasn't been answered though.
Right. I mean, okay. Let me comment. Let me comment a bit on Mary's question about that Methodist ministers don't prophesy. Let me put it that way in terms of foretelling, but rather during programs they bring people in to do some of these things. What we talk about are foretelling, like Reverend Wilson tried to explain, based on the kind of things that a typical Methodist minister will be doing. Most of it, or majority of that, borders on this idea of foretelling. Okay, but like he said, when they bring in these people, and I think Charles made a point that what is the motive? I mean, the little I know, and by my experience, I think what is happening is that Methodist Church Ghana seem to be copying some of these practices that are out there that attract people. So my understanding is that it's not really for the purposes of they come in there to do any Bible teaching or do any. It's maybe to help them either the revival thing that we're talking about, that we've got somebody powerful in quotes who has come to revive us and things like that. And I'm sure it will be somebody who has a name within society. I don't know whether that really answers the question properly, but let's hear Nana Kwabwa, and after that, Charles and Daniel may want to add. Nana, if you can go ahead, please.
It's still on mute.
It's Nana, please unmute yourself. Yes, okay.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nana Akwabo. And what I'm saying is, like, when we look at the basis of our Christianity, it's based on belief. And the word belief is inactive. If, like, we are all sitting in our rooms right now, if we see a snake or we see something, we are going to react. So when we base on belief to relate to political, economic, and all development, we are not going to do anything. The reason being that belief is inactive, you don't see nothing. And like our lives are based on, our life is ongoing. It's a relationship, and we are using belief. So my question is, how can we use belief as a Christian to relate to development, or developmental or like economic and all that? How can we use belief to develop our society? That's my question.
Okay, thank you very much, Nana. I think I will remind Charles and Daniel that we also have a question on, does technological improvement do away with the operations of God? And then Nana has also asked about how can we rely on belief as a people to be able to connect with physical things. I think that is the point that he's making. And if you've got other responses, please feel free to add to it. And let me announce that we'll try to squeeze the discussion within the next 10 minutes. So please, if you have questions, you can feel free to type in the chat box, or you can type in the tab or suggestions or comment, and then we'll take them from there. Thank you all.
Well,
Daniel,
let me try to address the two questions very quickly. One, does technology make God redundant? The answer is both yes and no. And I will answer both yes and no in this way. The fact that we are scattered around the world, and yet I can see Sappho in his study will come across to any first century human being as supernatural. So the concept of supernatural evolves. And once you admit that the concept of supernatural evolves, you have to understand that as technology advances, certain aspects of how we perceived not only the world, but also how we perceive our own role and our relationship with God in this cosmos will also go through changes and transformation. So that it's a fact that the evidence speaks for themselves. I heard a sister who talked on the platform about participating in some eradication program somewhere. Once upon a time, if you suffer from leprosy, the biblical understanding was that it was a curse from God. Science has now been able to engage with leprosy, and it is becoming a thing of the past. So the point, and the sciences, community will tell us, when COVID-19 hit our screen, I was looking for the prophets, to come and tell us the causes of COVID-19. It was science that told us. So as scientific development advances, our perception about universe, the perception about ourselves, and the perception about that ongoing relationship with God will go through changes. At what stage God becomes redundant, it is neither for me or anybody to predict. Whether God becomes redundant at all, it's a matter of opinion and a matter of perception. And as a social anthropologist, who trace my ancestry to philosophy and history, one thing that I know is that philosophers have always told that even if God did not exist, we will create one for ourselves. Because by nature, human beings always want to create something that transcends themselves. And that is part of history. If we don't create heroes, we create gods. So whether God becomes redundant with advancement of technology, that is a matter of historical processes. And historical processes has taught us that our understanding about the universe. I mean, can you imagine a first century person knowing that now we can send somebody to space, not only to go and come, but to go and stay there for some time? This would have been a magic, a miracle, or whatever we would have called it in the first century. So science changed our perception about the universe, our perception about ourselves, and our perception about our relationship with God. Quickly and briefly, because the two questions are interrelated, to what extent does belief and development, link together? Your belief system determines your development. I repeat, your belief system serves as your theoretical basis for your development. If you believe that it's not mosquito that causes malaria, but it is the witches that causes malaria, you will go and chase the witches rather than give your university's money in the scientific community to find out why these viruses causes malaria. So belief system, whether it is religious beliefs, whether it is socio-economic, political beliefs, they serve as our theoretical basis for our development. I'm sorry to say, and as Asamoah Bosumtwe touched on it, that society forgets that there have been places where once upon a time religion reigned. And because religion was not, was abused, because religion was abused, it became redundant. Let's not forget that the reason why in many European countries, religion is now becoming a suspect is also not simply about scientific development, but it's also about how the belief system was abused. I know that in my own Church of England, once upon a time, we persecuted the Methodists. We persecuted them. That John Wesley is bringing a new religion, therefore he's a suspect. So how belief system learns to serve as a good theoretical basis for development is the issue. But you cannot develop without a form of belief system. Belief system, science has its own roots in a belief system. A scientific research always starts with a theory, and the theory matures into hypothesis, and the hypotheses are tested in the laboratory. That is all how our science, develop. So I will say quickly, technology and God. Does technology makes God redundant? It is very difficult to answer that question, but the historical processes do tell us that as our technology advances, our perception about God, our perception about our universe, and our perception about ourselves also go through evolution. And I have to hasten to add, that will also determine the moral values of that society. Moral values are not written in stones. Moral values themselves, they also evolve. And part of the evolution of our moral system is also about our self-preservation as a society. So all the three are linked together: moral values, technological development, and our concept of God. It's like a dancing in a circle. They all go around. And we need a belief system in place, because your belief system, whether it is good or bad, will determine your development in human history. A quick example: when the Wright brothers started talking about planes, there were people within the Christian community who thought that this is witchcraft. And I'm telling you a historical fact. Some Christians believe that the idea that you can fly a plane in the air is witchcraft. Today, without a plane, none of us will be here. It has changed the idea about concept of witchcraft and our concept of the universe. That, I leave it to the physicists, how a plane can travel in the air I don't have the scientific expertise to comment on that, but people use their belief system that I can fly the plane in the air, and now we all fly by plane. If the beliefs is still flying in the plane is witchcraft, then all of us have been bewitched, because without plane, we wouldn't be where we are at the moment for many of us. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. I know Charles will follow up, but Charles, if you can factor that in your concluding statement, so that will give Enoch the chance to also part question or contribution or suggestion. Enoch, please.
Okay. I do believe that the whole idea of prophecy, that is foretelling, has come about because of our anxiety about the future. Let me address this people, the Wright brothers. What is fascinating is sometimes we think we can leave our belief systems behind, that our belief systems remain primitive. It is not. Those things go with us and they move as we move forward and our histories change. These Wright brothers came from the mission house. They have a belief system. And their belief system taught them that if they can create wings, they can fly. Grace and mercy teach us that we are all much larger than the good or bad, those bad stories we tell about ourselves, or we tell each one, especially people like us who have gone through so much. Our small fear-based stories are usually what we tell people. And we do so because we believe that that is our truth. But I'll tell you that we tell those stories about Nananumpo and our failures and the fact that we can't put one and one together, because these stories are based on our hurts and disappointments. They are based on our unconscious agendas that persuade us to see and judge things in a very selective way. But I'll tell you, we are more than that. That is not the whole you as a Ghanaian or African. And that can never be the life that I believe when we were dismissed from the garden, we were asked to go out there and grapple with. I believe that faith, or that belief system that supports us, might be precisely the ability to trust God and his providential love, which is to trust its visible embodiment in Christ or the church, the flow of the Holy Spirit, and the source itself, which is the creator. This is the divine process that we are supposed to participate in. We are supposed to engage with God in this endeavor to make the world a better place. And that is what we pray for in our Lord's Prayer. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This is a divine process that we don't have to change, or we don't have to coerce, or we don't have to improve. We just need to allow it and enjoy it and participate in it. The desire to know the future, as we've discussed here, stems out of fear. We are afraid of tomorrow. We are afraid of the world we live in. And since we do not have a better understanding of ourselves and our place in the world, we seek to coerce the future. We seek to coerce the narrative. We seek to change the divine process, which is an enterprise we have entered into with God. God has given us the ability to improve upon everything that is available to us on this earth. That faith should propel us to take these things and transform them. Our message is transformation, isn't it? As Christians, our message is transformation. Everything we touch, we should be able to transform it into gold. We should make it better. So we fail to see that the lives we live is an invitation to participate in God's ongoing narrative through Jesus Christ. So to see our life as we live it and the progress we are required and expected to make, we need to see it as an enterprise between God and man, a divine initiative and a human action. These take immense confidence in God, especially for people who are hurting, especially for people who are not doing very well by the world standards, especially for people who are struggling. Often we feel ourselves get panicky and we quickly want to do things right. We lose our ability to be present and go up into our heads and start obsessing. And when that happens to us, we are not really feeling or experiencing things in our hearts and bodies. We are oriented toward making things happen, forcing things to happen, trying to push or even create our own reality. And so we seek divination. That is the only way we believe we can create our own reality. But we forget that God's good creation, the way things work, are already engulfed us. And we are already involved and we are participating in it, no matter how small your part is. So faith does not need to push that reality precisely because it's able to change things. No, the divine process is there. God has created you and I to make a life here on earth until our time comes when he calls us home. The divine process is already there for us to participate in. This is probably the deepest meaning of divine providence. So I would like you not to be afraid. We have been proactively given the Spirit by a very proactive God to work on what we have here to make it better for ourselves and the future generations. It took faith for someone to believe that they can catapult a machine through the skies and have it land at a designated place at a particular time, and the people on this object will get off this vehicle safe and sound. It took faith. So I will ask you to ask yourself regularly, what am I afraid of? And does it matter what I'm afraid of? Well, whatever I'm afraid of matter in the great scheme of things. Is it worth holding on to it? Or is it worth going to see another human being to tell me what God has in store for me? We have to ask whether it is fear that keeps us from loving. You should always remember, grace will lead us into such fears and emptiness, and grace alone can fill them if we are willing to stay in the void. But I tell you, we mustn't engineer an answer too quickly to the issues that we see around us. Some things may take years to unravel. There are things that we will continuously see in the mirror dimly. There are things that we may never understand. There are so many things we are going to leave to the next generation. But we must not get settled too fast and ask for a miracle.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. Enoch, you wanted to follow up. If you can follow up quickly, and then Daniel can give a brief summary. Enoch?
Oh, okay. Thanks very much. I was listening to I think the last word given by Brother Charles has helped a lot in answering the question I had. But I was on the issue of technology and God, in a sense that I see from the first attempt to address the question, I noticed there was a gap in the analogy. That I think that whilst we relate technology to advancement in knowledge, the typical question or the fair question to ask ourselves, how have we advanced in our knowledge of God aside what has been written in the Bible? What, by yourself, what additional knowledge have you added? I'm a lecturer. I always tell my students, we are looking for novelty. What's your contribution? What new knowledge are you introducing in your study or in your paper? It's fair to ask ourselves the same when it comes to the knowledge of God. Elijah can tell you what he knows. Aside what Elijah has told you, what do you know about God for yourself? So that if we neglect that side and we rely on what Elijah knows, Elijah died over several years ago. We will look at cake to compare that knowledge to the level of advancement we are now, where we can heal diseases which in Elijah's time were not possible to heal, or will take a divine intervention to heal. So we can only answer this question if we create a fair ground. The fair ground is that knowledge drives technology. So it's fair to also ask ourselves, has our knowledge increased in God aside what we already know? If yes, then we have a fair platform or a balance to compare the two. That if we have advanced 100 years in human knowledge and technology, how many years have we advanced in adding to the knowledge of what we came to know about God? So that at my level of learning, I doubt if anyone can convince me otherwise about what I have learned for myself and found for myself and understand and understood for myself. For those who are not able to help themselves to advance in knowledge, they will be deceived. And there's nothing anyone can do about it. So it's fair to address the two, that technology and knowledge, first of all, if you believe in God, you know knowledge comes from God. In that sense, technology does not move without knowledge. So without God, there's actually no life, no technology, no knowledge. So it's fair. That's why I said Brother Charles' submission helped to address that.
All right, wonderful. Daniel, can you give us your concluding statement? I mean, my apologies for going beyond the time.
Thank you very much. I will address a few issues very, very quickly because we've gone beyond time. Brother Enoch, thank you for your contribution but what about those people who don't have any belief in God, but have also advanced? Science does not necessarily have to rely for so many people on even the concept of God to develop.
No, I'm not relating the concept of advancement to the belief or knowledge in God. I'm saying that for us to compare the two, it is fair that if you are linking knowledge as the base, as a measuring unit for technology, then use the same unit to measure what we know about God. So if you, for example, in your submission, you used the concept of leprosy, that around that time, if you had leprosy, it's a curse from God, you are excommunicated. It's not so now. So I understand you are using knowledge as the base for what you are saying. So I'm saying it's fair to also evaluate the level of knowledge we have in God and compare the two. Else you have an unbalanced and one side will look bad. That's what I'm saying.
I don't want one side to look bad. I'm talking about facts. People who wanted to transcend, the boundaries that the church gave them were persecuted. It's a fact. It's not, today, a lot of the electricity that we enjoy, we take it for granted. But people who started electricity, you come to British Society of Sciences and they will tell you that many people within the church thought that even to think about electricity, you are dabbling in alchemy, which is a kind of superstitious beliefs, So knowledge itself is nothing but epistemology, the way you look at the world. If you believe that the world is controlled by some supernatural forces, well, that is your knowledge. And that will determine how far you can go. If you believe that your fate is in your own hands, that also determines how far you can go. I think the problem that we have in Africa is this, or the problem that Christianity at the moment has is this, that it's very, very difficult for us to break from any attempts that set us free to think about the world, in a way that question our own faith. You cannot seriously tell me that it is unfair for anybody to say. In fact, technology itself raises questions about our knowledge of God. You cannot dispute that. So any knowledge of God that we possess, unless we have opened ourselves up for that knowledge to be challenged by technology, we will not be prepared to grow in our knowledge. There is a passage in the Bible that I love so much. It said, to your zeal, add understanding. Understanding comes sometimes from experimentation. Understanding comes sometimes by expanding our horizon. So I completely want to say that the defense that religion can sometimes be presented unfairly is, if there are any unfairness, then it is the defensiveness of anything that challenges our understanding. Throughout my presentation, I didn't even talk about the Bible itself. There are many issues in the Bible which today, if you subject it to scientific tests, and you yourself made an example of it, that Elijah knowledge is, 700 centuries ago. No, that's true. And if I'm not going to use the knowledge of Elijah, where is my knowledge come from? It's going to come from science. And for my knowledge to come from science, I should be prepared to embrace what science is telling me. So I don't think it's really unfair, or one wants to create an imbalance. What one wants to do is, how much do we allow our faith to be challenged by knowledge? And coming back to prophets, that is what the prophets were trying to do. Is it fair, for example, for somebody to say that, I believe that it is the demons who creates, diseases in my community? No scientific community will hold on to that. So we need to be very, very critical about faith itself. By faith, many of our people in our community are being exploited day by day. So faith itself is part of the problem, and that needs to be subject to critique. Without subjecting faith to critique, some of the things that we are saying, sometimes the prophets have to even attack false religion. So I don't think that anybody wants to caricaturize religion. Rather, what one wants to say is, lack of a proper understanding of religion can equally lead to our destruction. Whenever I've been into conversation, one of the things that often saddens me is that we unconsciously defend religion even when it is indefensible. And people have done that and they have lost the argument. So my kind of appeal is, if all of us on this platform are going to perform our prophetic role very well, one of our assignments will be to question faith itself. Because without questioning faith, we will remain where we are. Because faith, psychologically speaking, is very difficult to question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, to complement that.
Charles, if you can make it snappy, please,
Yeah,
because we are far within time. Yeah.
Yes, to complement that, I think we should seek a better understanding of religion or Christianity. A better understanding of Christianity. In today's religious environment, the political climate and everything, I do believe what stands out as most urgent and vital is our compassionate engagement with the world. And talking about compassionate engagement, I mean the reality of our oneness with God, the reality of our oneness with other people, all kinds of people, gay, black, white, whoever, and also the creation. And I do believe when we put all these together, we engage all these, our belief in transformation in Christianity, our actions invariably lead to healing, justice, development, progress, and even the prayer for the kingdom of God to come on earth as it is in heaven. We naturally follow the divine order, which what I call the divine order. We work to create a more whole world by a contemplation of these. And these actions by themselves, in themselves, are progressive, are loving, and they, in the long haul, help us emancipate ourselves from the kind of slavery we are going through with the religiosity that has been handed down to us. That's all I will add.
Thank you very much. Let me say a big thank you to Daniel and to Charles for availing yourselves for our conversation today. And I'm also very grateful to all that spent time with us. Your suggestions, your questions, they've been very thought-provoking. And I believe that we've all benefited in one way or the other. Faith and Society would try to come your way, like we said, once every month. For May, it's most likely going to be the second week of May, around the 14th of May. So please make a date and we're going to keep you informed. Before we sign off, I want to say that feel free to send suggestions, messages, or if you have a topic in mind for the next conversation or you have an idea, feel free to get in touch and we'll be happy to engage with you. Thank you all for coming, and I hope that as the week rolls on, as the months and then the years, we'll be able to play our effective role as real prophets who are making our lives also make contribution to our world and human flourishing generally. Thank you very much, and bye for now.